Luigi Mangione's story began in Towson, Maryland, a community known for its affluence and charm, where sprawling estates stood as symbols of success. Born into the Mangione family, Luigi's early life was steeped in privilege. His grandfather, Nicholas Mangione Sr., had built an empire of wealth through real estate and healthcare ventures. This wasn't just a family with money, it was a dynasty. The Mangione name carried weight in Baltimore. Nicholas Sr's holdings included prestigious properties like Turf Valley Resort, a sprawling golf and leisure destination, and Hayfields Country Club. The family's ventures extended into senior healthcare, owning a chain of rehabilitation centers under Lorien Health Services. They also had a voice in the media, owning Wapney, a prominent local radio station. Luigi grew up surrounded by these achievements, with expectations that he too would carry the torch forward. But the Mangione family wasn't just known for business. Luigi's grandmother, Mary, was a patron of the arts, donating generously to cultural institutions like the Baltimore Opera Company and the Walters Art Museum. Civic duty ran through their veins, with Luigi's cousin, Nino Mangione, serving as a Republican representative in Baltimore County. It was an ecosystem of influence, and Luigi was expected to thrive within it. From a young age, it was clear that Luigi had the intellect and drive to match his family's ambitions. At Gilman School, one of Baltimore's most prestigious preparatory institutions, Luigi shone brightly. He graduated valedictorian, earning top marks in academics while also excelling in extracurriculars. He was a member of the wrestling team, his discipline evident both on and off the mat. Robotics and computer science captured his imagination, and he co-founded a video game development company with classmates, a feat that only bolstered his reputation as a prodigy. In his valedictorian speech, Luigi spoke with conviction. "We must challenge the world around us," he said, urging his peers to think critically and pursue innovation. His words resonated, leaving little doubt that this young man had a bright future ahead. After high school, Luigi's trajectory remained upward. He was accepted into the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League institution known for cultivating the nation's elite. There, he majored in computer science, specializing in artificial intelligence, and minored in mathematics. He wasn't just a student, he was a leader. Luigi co-founded a game development club, continuing to explore his passion for technology. His internships included stints at cutting-edge companies, even at Firaxis Games, the creators of the Civilization series. His resume seemed destined for greatness. Luigi earned both his bachelor's and master's degrees at Penn, completing them in record time. By his mid-20s, he was working as a data engineer at TrueCar, a position that signaled his entrance into the world of innovation and technology. Yet, despite his achievements, there were whispers of something beneath the surface, a disconnect that would only grow with time. To the outside world, Luigi Mangione appeared to have everything: intelligence, opportunity, and a family legacy that placed him among the privileged few. But privilege is not a shield from inner struggles. Friends noticed subtle changes in Luigi as the years went by. He seemed quieter, more introspective. The confident young man who had once spoken of challenging the world now seemed burdened by it. For all his accomplishments, Luigi carried the weight of expectation. The Mangione family was not one to accept mediocrity, and Luigi's path had been paved with the kind of resources and support that demanded results. Success wasn't just encouraged, it was required. In many ways, his life had been a series of benchmarks to meet, each one higher than the last. And while Luigi's brilliance shone brightly, the pressure to uphold the Mangione loomed larger with each passing year. It was easy to overlook the warning signs. Luigi was adept at masking his struggles, presenting a composed exterior to those around him. But behind the facade of privilege and achievement, cracks were beginning to form. His life, once a symbol of promise and potential, was quietly unraveling. By 2023, the first clear signs of trouble began to emerge. Luigi underwent spinal surgery to address a chronic condition that had caused him significant pain. Friends and family noticed his demeanor change after the procedure. The physical recovery was challenging, but the emotional toll seemed even greater. Luigi, once vibrant and engaged, began withdrawing from his social circles. His once active online presence dwindled, and messages from friends went unanswered. No one could have predicted where his story would lead, least of all those who had watched him rise so far. Luigi Mangione had been a golden child, a promising figure destined to carry his family's legacy forward. But beneath the surface of his life of privilege lay a darkness that no one saw coming. The events of November 15, 2024, began like any other morning in Midtown Manhattan. The streets buzzed with early commuters, the hum of taxi engines, and the rhythm of hurried footsteps. For Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, it was just another day in his carefully planned schedule. He was en route to the Hilton Hotel for an investors' conference, an event where his presence as a leading executive in the health insurance industry was indispensable. Thompson exited his car near the hotel entrance at 8:15 a.m., dressed sharply in a tailored suit, his briefcase in hand. But as he approached the revolving doors of the Hilton, the ordinary morning took a horrifying turn. In a split second, chaos erupted. A man, dressed in dark clothing and wearing a mask, emerged from the crowd. Without hesitation, the assailant raised a gun, firing a single shot at close range. Thompson collapsed to the ground as the attacker fled, leaving the CEO bleeding on the sidewalk. The entire incident unfolded in mere moments. Witnesses described the gunshot as deafening, shattering the usual morning clamor. Some ducked for cover, while others rushed to Thompson's aid. Panic spread as bystanders realized the gravity of the situation. Within minutes, emergency services arrived, but it was too late. Brian Thompson, a prominent figure in corporate America, was pronounced dead at the scene. The precision of the attack left little doubt about its intent. This was no random act of violence, it was an assassination. Surveillance cameras captured the suspect's escape, a quick sprint into Central Park, where he discarded the weapon and hopped onto a bicycle. He weaved through the park's paths, blending into the flow of commuters before vanishing into the urban labyrinth. The NIPT quickly took control of the investigation. Security footage from the area became the focal point of their efforts, revealing a masked figure methodically executing the crime and retreating with calculated precision. Within hours, authorities released images of the suspect to the public, captured from a nearby Starbucks. The blurry photos showed a man with a mask obscuring his face, but his distinctive build and attire stood out. As the investigation progressed, more surveillance footage came to light. The suspect had checked into a Manhattan hostel the night before the murder, using a counterfeit New Jersey driver's license. Additional images from the hostel showed him unmasked, smiling casually, a chilling juxtaposition to the cold, calculated act he would carry out just hours later. From the moment the images were released, the hunt for the shooter became a top priority for law enforcement. The FBI joined the NIPT, and a joint task force was established to track down the suspect. The urgency of the case was magnified by the nature of the crime. The assassination of a high-profile CEO in one of the busiest cities in the world was bound to send shockwaves through the corporate and public spheres. Over the next several days, the search intensified. Investigators pieced together the suspect's movements, tracking him as he fled Manhattan. After abandoning his bike, he hailed a cab and traveled to a bus terminal, where he boarded a coach bound for Pennsylvania. Authorities suspected he had switched identities multiple times, using fake IDs and cash to avoid detection. The public's help became crucial in the search. A reward of $10,000 was initially offered for information leading to the suspect's capture, later increased by an additional $50,000 from the FBI. Tips began pouring in, but many led to dead ends. Despite the suspect's calculated steps, his image was everywhere on news broadcasts, social media, and digital billboards across the region. The turning point came on November 21st, 6 days after the murder. In Altoona, Pennsylvania, a sharp-eyed McDonald's employee recognized a man sitting in the corner booth. He matched the photos released by the NIPT. Nervous but determined, the employee called 911, providing the critical tip authorities had been waiting for. When officers arrived at the McDonald's, they approached the man cautiously. His reaction was immediate and telling. Upon being asked if he had been in New York recently, he visibly tensed, his hands shaking as he attempted to respond. His evasive behavior only solidified their suspicions. Within minutes, Luigi Mangione, the man now officially identified as the suspect in Brian Thompson's assassination, was taken into custody. Mangione's arrest marked the end of a harrowing manhunt, but it also raised a new set of questions. Who was this young man? And why had he targeted one of the most powerful executives in the country? The answers, authorities suspected, lay in the items found on him at the time of his arrest. Among Mangione's possessions were a ghost gun, a homemade firearm assembled from untraceable parts, and a suppressor, both of which matched descriptions of the weapon used in the murder. Police also discovered a collection of fake IDs, including the counterfeit New Jersey license he had used at the hostel in Manhattan. Perhaps most chilling was a handwritten manifesto outlining his motives and expressing his disdain for corporate America. The document referred to corporate leaders as parasites and rationalized the assassination as necessary. As news of Mangione's arrest spread, so did speculation about his motive. For many, the murder of Brian Thompson was a horrifying act of violence. But for others, particularly those critical of the healthcare industry, it sparked disturbing celebrations online. Some hailed Mangione as a hero, framing the assassination as an act of rebellion against corporate greed. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro condemned such reactions in a public statement. "This killer is no hero. The real hero is the citizen who called 911. We cannot allow violence to be glorified." The shockwaves from the assassination continued to ripple outward. For United Healthcare, the loss of their CEO left a gaping void at the helm of one of the nation's largest insurance companies. For the public, it was a reminder of the vulnerabilities even the most powerful individuals face. And for law enforcement, the case was far from over. Mangione's arrest was just the beginning of a larger investigation, one that would delve into the mind of a man who had everything to lose and yet chose a path of destruction. The manhunt for Luigi Mangione was relentless, spanning 6 days and involving a web of investigative resources, public cooperation, and sheer determination. From the moment Brian Thompson's assassination footage was released, it was clear to law enforcement that this wasn't a random act of violence, it was a calculated hit. The suspect had planned his escape as meticulously as the murder itself, but even the most carefully constructed plans can unravel. After shooting Thompson in broad daylight outside the Hilton Hotel, the suspect melted into the Manhattan crowd. Surveillance footage captured his every move, fleeing on a bicycle through Central Park, abandoning the bike near an exit, and hailing a cab to a bus terminal. From there, Mangione purchased a one-way ticket out of New York, leaving investigators with only fragments of his trail to follow. The first break in the case came from the surveillance footage at a Manhattan hostel. Hours before the murder, the suspect had checked in using a counterfeit New Jersey driver's license. What stood out most about this footage was the stark contrast it offered: a man unmasked, smiling casually for the hostel's cameras, oblivious to the heinous act he was about to commit. Investigators pored over the footage, matching the suspect's attire and physical build to the shooter in the earlier images. This connection solidified Luigi Mangione as the prime suspect. The NIPT wasted no time in releasing images of Mangione to the public, enlisting their help in the hunt. The photos circulated widely: grainy shots from the Starbucks near the scene, clearer images from the hostel, and another snapshot from inside a cab, where Mangione was once again masked. Within hours, the city was on high alert. Posters, news broadcasts, and digital billboards displayed his face, urging anyone with information to come forward. Despite his attempts to evade capture, Mangione's every move left breadcrumbs. As investigators pieced together his journey, they discovered he had taken a bus to Pennsylvania. This widened the search area significantly, but it also gave law enforcement more opportunities to trace his movements. The FBI joined the investigation, offering an additional $50,000 reward on top of the NYPD's initial $10,000. The combined $60,000 incentive spurred a flood of tips, though many led to dead ends. Meanwhile, the manhunt took on a more urgent tone when new information surfaced about Mangione's weapon: a ghost gun. Assembled from untraceable components and paired with a suppressor, the weapon was designed for maximum lethality and anonymity. Teams of divers scoured Central Park's waters, suspecting that Mangione had discarded the weapon during his escape. When the weapon wasn't found, investigators began considering a chilling possibility that he still had it. Mangione's capture ultimately came not from sophisticated technology or undercover operations, but from the vigilance of an ordinary citizen. On November 21st, 6 days after the murder, a McDonald's employee in Altoona, Pennsylvania, made the critical call. The employee noticed a man sitting alone in the back of the restaurant, his face matching the widely circulated photos. The man seemed nervous, glancing around as he sipped his drink. Trusting their instincts, the employee called 911, setting the final phase of the manhunt into motion. When officers arrived, they approached cautiously, their eyes scanning the quiet fast food dining room. Mangione's demeanor changed the moment he was questioned. Asked if he had recently been in New York, His hands began to tremble and his voice faltered. The physical reaction was enough to confirm their suspicions. Within minutes, Luigi Mangione was in handcuffs, the long chase finally over. The items recovered during Mangione's arrest painted a disturbing picture. He was carrying the ghost gun, a homemade firearm that investigators immediately linked to the murder. Alongside the weapon, officers found a suppressor, several fake IDs, and, most chillingly, a handwritten manifesto. The document contained phrases that revealed his motives, referring to corporate executives as parasites and justifying the murder as necessary. The arrest was announced with great relief. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro addressed the media, praising the quick thinking of the McDonald's employee. "This killer is no hero," Shapiro said, addressing the online outpouring of support for Mangione. "The real hero is the person who called 911. For law enforcement, the arrest marked the culmination of a tense and high-profile operation. But it also opened the door to more questions. What had driven Mangione to commit such a brazen act? How had a promising Ivy League graduate descended into the role of an assassin? And what secrets did his manifesto hold about his true motives? As Mangione was booked into Blair County Prison, the investigation shifted gears. His arrest provided a chance to examine his psyche, his motives, and the connections between his privileged upbringing and the violent act that had shocked the nation. The search for answers had only just begun. As investigators delved deeper into Luigi Mangione's life, a troubling picture began to emerge. Once celebrated as a prodigy with limitless potential, Mangione had spent the months leading up to the murder withdrawing from the very world he had been poised to conquer. Friends and family noticed his absence, but no one foresaw the darkness that had taken hold. In 2023, Mangione underwent spinal surgery to address chronic pain that had been disrupting his daily life. The recovery was grueling, both physically and emotionally. Friends described him as increasingly reclusive, avoiding social gatherings and disengaging from conversations. Online, his presence faded. Posts from concerned classmates reflected growing unease. "Where have you been? Nobody's heard from you in months." But the physical isolation was only part of the story. As Mangione retreated from his social circles, his ideological leanings grew more extreme. Investigators discovered that he had been consuming material that fueled a deep resentment towards modern society, particularly corporate America. A Goodreads account linked to Mangione revealed his fascination with Ted Kaczynski's industrial society and its future, often called the Unabomber Manifesto. The account praised the work, calling it impossible to ignore and eerily prescient. Social media posts echoed this growing alienation. One quoted philosopher J. Krishnamurti, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." In hindsight, the signs were clear. Mangione's discontent had shifted from personal struggles to a broader ideological disdain for the structures around him. The manifesto found on Mangione at the time of his arrest confirmed the depth of his animosity. Handwritten and filled with scathing critiques of corporate greed, it referred to executives like Brian Thompson as parasites. One chilling line stood out: "I do apologize for the strife and trauma, but it had to be done." What caused this dissent? For some, the answer lay in the combination of physical pain, social isolation, and unchecked extremism. Mangione's disconnection from his once promising life created a vacuum, one that was filled by resentment and a distorted sense of purpose. But for others, the why didn't matter as much as the outcome. A promising young man had become a killer, and an innocent life had been taken in the process. The trial of Luigi Mangione began with an air of tension that hung heavy over the Manhattan courthouse. Reporters lined the steps, cameras flashing as lawyers, family members, and observers filed inside. The murder of Brian Thompson, a high-profile CEO, had captured national attention, and the man accused of orchestrating the assassination, a privileged Ivy League graduate with a history of brilliance, added a layer of intrigue and complexity. Mangione faced charges of second-degree murder, forgery, weapons violations, and possession of untraceable firearms. Prosecutors spared no detail in their case against him. They painted Mangione as a man who meticulously planned the murder, using a ghost gun with a suppressor, forged identification, and calculated escape routes. His handwritten manifesto, found at the time of his arrest, was presented as evidence of his premeditation. He called Brian Thompson a parasite, the lead prosecutor stated in their opening arguments. He justified this murder as a necessity. This was not a crime of passion. It was an act of ideological extremism. The prosecution laid out a timeline of events, reconstructing the weeks leading up to the murder. They described how Mangione had rented a bed at a Manhattan hostel using a fake ID and spent days observing Thompson's routines. The day of the murder, he lay in wait outside the Hilton Hotel, wearing a mask to obscure his identity. Surveillance footage captured the cold, calculated moment when Mangione approached Thompson and fired a single shot before disappearing into the chaos of Midtown Manhattan. The defense, however, took a different approach. They acknowledged that Mangione had committed the act but argued that his actions were the result of a mental and emotional breakdown. His attorney detailed Mangione's physical and psychological decline following his spinal surgery in 2023, presenting medical records and testimony from doctors who treated him for chronic pain. Luigi Mangione was a brilliant young man who faced unbearable pain and isolation, the defense argued. This tragedy is the result of untreated trauma and a society that failed to catch him before he fell. To bolster their case, the defense called former friends and colleagues to the stand. They described Mangione as thoughtful, intelligent, and deeply passionate before his surgery. One college roommate testified, Luigi wasn't a violent person. He was someone who wanted to make the world better. But after the surgery, he changed. He stopped answering calls, stopped coming to events. It's like he disappeared. The courtroom also heard testimony about Mangione's ideological shift in the months before the murder. Prosecutors highlighted his fascination with the Unabomber manifesto and his social media posts quoting anti-corporate philosophy. This was not an isolated act, the prosecutor said. It was the culmination of a dangerous descent into extremism. The trial's emotional peak came when Brian Thompson's widow, Amanda, took the stand. Her voice trembled as she described the moment she learned her husband had been killed. He was just walking to work, she said through tears. He didn't deserve this. Our children didn't deserve to lose their father. Her testimony was a sobering reminder of the human cost of Mangione's actions. Public reaction to the trial was deeply divided. Some viewed Mangione as a cautionary tale of unaddressed mental health issues and societal pressure. Others condemned any attempt to justify his actions, emphasizing the deliberate nature of the crime. Online, the discourse was even more polarized. While many mourned Thompson's loss, others disturbingly praised Mangione as a vigilante against corporate greed. These debates spilled into protests outside the courthouse, where signs ranged from justice for Brian to end corporate corruption. As the trial progressed, broader societal issues came under scrutiny. The use of ghost guns, untraceable firearms assembled from kits became a focal point. Advocacy groups called for stricter regulations, citing Mangione's ability to construct a deadly weapon as a glaring loophole in gun control laws. Lawmakers introduced proposals aimed at banning the sale of ghost gun kits, spurred by the public outcry over Thompson's assassination. Mental health also became a central topic of discussion. Experts debated whether Mangione's actions were the result of untreated psychological distress or a deeper, inherent propensity for violence. This case highlights the dangers of ignoring mental health in young men under pressure, one psychologist noted. But it also shows how unchecked ideologies can fester in isolation. For the Mangione family, the trial was a devastating ordeal. Once celebrated for their legacy of success, they now faced relentless scrutiny. Luigi's mother, who had filed a missing persons report months before the murder, appeared in court but declined to speak publicly. His cousin, a state representative in Baltimore, issued a brief statement. "We are heartbroken and shocked. Our thoughts are with Brian Thompson's family during this unimaginable time." The trial culminated in closing arguments that left the jury visibly shaken. The prosecution reminded them of the precision and planning that went into the murder. This wasn't a mistake, the prosecutor declared. It was a calculated act of violence carried out by a man who believed he was above the law. The defense, in their final plea, emphasized Mangione's humanity. "Luigi Mangione is not a monster," his attorney said. "He is a young man who lost his way, a victim of pain and isolation. We ask for mercy." After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict, guilty on all counts. Luigi Mangione was sentenced to 25 years to life, a punishment that reflected the gravity of his crime, while leaving room for the possibility of rehabilitation. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read. For Thompson's family, it was a measure of justice but not closure. "We'll never get Brian back," Amanda Thompson said outside the courthouse. "But we hope this sends a message that violence is never the answer." The trial's aftermath left a lasting impact. For United Healthcare, the loss of Brian Thompson triggered a period of upheaval and introspection. For Mangione, the verdict marked the end of a once bright future and the beginning of a life defined by his darkest act. And for society, the case became a mirror, reflecting the intersections of privilege, ideology, and unchecked isolation. As Luigi Mangione was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, the weight of his choices settled over everyone involved. His story, once one of promise, had become a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the brightest minds can be consumed by darkness when left untethered.